So hello everyone, I'm Philip, I'm 16 years old, and I excused myself from school today so I can be here. My teacher asked, what are you doing in Scotland? And I told him I have to launch a satellite, I have to send it to space. He looked at me suspiciously and he told me, when I was your age, I had like better excuses. Yeah. Okay. So, about 10 years ago, I started building RC planes, flying them, trying to make them as efficient as I could. And then it took me about 7 years to switch to building satellites. So, at the beginning, I started building a CubeSat, which is a cylinder-shaped satellite that was supposed to fly on a water-based rocket. It was like a truly idealistic rocket, and it was a big source of inspiration for us and motivation to start building and developing satellites, even though it never made it to space. So, as you can see in the picture, we have ROM1 satellite, which is the cylinder next to our next mission, ROM2, which I will get in a few moments. Yeah, so this is Romanian Orbital Mission 2. It's a 1P PocketQube that will be launching on the SpaceX flight next year in June, to be more specific. It will be equipped with a 2-megapixel camera, and it will fly at about 650 kilometers. So it was built by 9 students from the International Computing High School of Bucharest. Okay. So after ROM2 gets to space, we plan to build a much more advanced 1P PocketQube that will also carry an IoT module. This one will be launched also in June of 2023 on board ESA's rocket Vega. Yeah. After we get those 2 satellites, we intend to fly our next and big mission called ROM3, which aims to send a whole constellation of satellites that will image Earth with a really high resolution, so we can see deforestation processes and all of the modifications that can appear in infrastructure, weather detection, and so on. We expect to fly our first sample of our first ROM3 satellite in 2024, if not earlier. Yeah. So we also intend to try to fly again ROM1 because it never made it to space, since we tried many times searching for other flights at multiple launch companies. ROM1 is almost like 5 times bigger than ROM2, so you can fit like bigger payloads inside. So it will be really cool to fly it. So this is a picture of us, our team, and I'd like to introduce our programmer to talk to you about.
Thank you. Oh, that's a mouse. Okay, thank you. How do I do this?
Right click.
Oh, okay. So, hello. I am Alexandru Lucianov, the lead programmer of this team, and I wish to begin by showing my appreciation and, how do I say this, admiration for our youngest member and project manager, Philip. Do you know what the difference is between a boss and a leader? A boss orders around, whilst the leader shows by example. Going by this criteria, I do believe that Philip is certainly a great leader. I mean, together we spent many nights. I know that this sounds weird, but we spent many nights working side by side in his basement on the satellite. Okay. And actually, this photo is from around 24 hours before our flight to Glasgow.
Yeah, we haven't slept at all that night. We just tried to finish the satellite so we can bring it here.
This is a replica. This is not the real satellite. We were working on a replica. Yeah, and I know what you are thinking, and I was thinking it too. Why were they working so hard on a replica? I mean, it just has to look the same. But no. We actually wanted it to be a functional replica because we thought, I mean, Philip thought, wouldn't it be badass if we finished the satellite in one night?
Yeah, it was also intended to be like a personal record. Yeah, finish a functional satellite in one night.
That night I wanted to go to sleep many times. However, I knew that even if I went to sleep, Philip would just keep on working, but this time twice as hard to make up for the lost part. Okay, and so to the next photo. Okay, another eventful night that I won't forget is the night we built our makeshift clean room. You know, clean rooms are expensive, so we decided to build a version of our own. And between the trips to the hardware store, the infernal sound of the grinding machine, and the plexiglass particles that I think shortened my lifespan by about 2 years, we managed to build it. Of course, I think that I was one of the more lucky ones, since our friend George, our lead grinding expert, I think he lost like about 10 years from this project. Okay. And this is, I know it's a low resolution, but the camera was not calibrated yet. We decided to do a little selfie. Okay, now for some technical details. As you know, the main payload of our satellite is a 2-megapixel camera. This photo is actually done with the satellite. I know that it's really hard to see, but it's there. And we will send that, the images done by the camera, using SSDV packets, which will be sent through JFSK modulation. We will also send housekeeping data, such as internal temperature, voltage, current, and the number of resets of the satellite, using Morse code. Why do we do this using Morse code instead of JFSK as the images? Well, because it's more accessible this way, since Morse code is easily recognizable, easy to decode, and easy to receive. And we wanted to also allow everyone with an antenna just to point it at the sky. I mean, if they're lucky enough to catch a good transmission window, to be able to receive something from our satellite, since we all started there with, just an antenna. And yeah, do I also have, no, I don't have an, excuse me. One other thing which I wish to say is that we also wish to build a ground station. Of course, we won't be able to make do with just one ground station, since, as you all know, very rarely does the satellite pass over us, and even then, you have to be very lucky to get a good transmission window. To create such luck, we want to join the SatNox community. I think that most of you here are familiar with it. Mostly, there are multiple people that have a ground station, and they share what they catch with their ground station with the other people, and so everyone can see what their satellite is doing. Of course, you can simply be a volunteer and not have a satellite, but have a ground station. And in the end, I wish to say that along this project, I learned many things some that I wish I didn't have to learn. But the greatest thing is that I met many extraordinary and passionate people, especially here at this workshop. And for more technical details, I'll let my friend David tell you.
Yeah. One moment. Okay, so I actually prepared a couple of notes, but since it's better to present on the projector, I'll do it so. During my presentation, I am going to show you a general overview of the satellite, though perhaps you have already you already know that by now because we actually talked with a couple of you here. So it goes the following way. Okay. Yeah, we have a 1x1 PocketQube, and it's a 5x5 by 5 centimeter, which is exactly the standard model. We have a 5.8 by 6x4 centimeter deployer base, which is the standard Alba orbital deployer. Yeah. And we have a special type of aluminum used for the case, which is the aluminum 0682, 6082, which is used for satellite's case because it has a stronger alloy. It generally used also, it's also known as a machination alloy because it's used in hard industry. For the gyroscope, we use permanent magnets, whose characteristics I will show you on the following page. And for the electrical part, we have a battery with lithium-ion, which at its effective value, it works with 3.7 volts and 120 milliamperes. For the solar panels, we have 37 solar cells. The interesting part about our solar cells is the following. We don't have only, as I showed you, we have 37 solar cells. We don't have 37 faces. We have just 6 faces. One face is occupied by the camera, and other faces are also occupied by the other components, essentially. But the thing goes as follows. We have 3 faces covered with 5 solar panels, and 1 face covered with 7, and 1 face covered with 6. That sum gives 37 solar cells. Why we did that? For redundancy. Because we worked in a cellar, literally. We did not have very high conditions of cleanliness or very fine aperture. We perhaps might have scratched a solar cell. We did not, but we might have done that once. And that could have led to a complete loss of the solar cell. We split our solar cells in 37 parts for redundancy. That's it. The total area of the solar cells is 69.2 centimeters squared. The minimum exposed area at the sun at a given time can be at least 11.22 centimeters squared. And I'll show you in the next slide why that's important. And the maximum exposed area can be of 14.96 centimeters squared. Those are calculated by hand. The payload is a 2 megapixel camera, as mentioned before, and it uses, it has a maximum capacity of using 1600 per 1200 pixels, but we use only 320 by 240 megapixels. Why we do that? Because it consumes a lot of power, and the time required to essentially cool it down and make a couple of tests to see that everything is fine would be too long to transfer the whole, to use the whole capacity of the camera. And the antennas, we have a simple dipole antenna. Its total length is 30 centimeters, and it uses the radio frequency of 436.235 megahertz, which is commonly used by radio amateurs. We got that license, and we prefer to use the radio amateur frequency because doing so, we can also get help from the radio amateur community, because if we only used our ground station and used a special frequency for ourselves, aside from the fact that it's very hard to get one, we also did not have a very large window of reception from the satellite. And that's why we used one of the reasons why we used the radio amateur frequency. And yeah, in the left, it's, again, a photo of the satellite 24 hours prior flight, less than 24 hours prior flight to Glasgow, in the time it was built. So the replica, which is essentially another satellite. And it doesn't quite fit. Okay, a couple of details about the components. The solar panels have efficiency between 21 and 25. For the calculations here, I use the medium of 23%. And the maximum possible power given by them is 1.9 watts. The minimum is 1.17 watts, which is more than enough to power the satellite if we give it enough time to recharge. It can take a couple of photos in the back, in the dark side of the orbit, though we don't rely on that. The battery has the optimal behavior between 2.9 and 3.9 volts. That showed on the previous slide is the maximum voltage. And it has a maximum operating temperature of 60 degrees Celsius. That can be reached only by overloading it, essentially by sending the whole, by using the whole capacity of the camera. That's one of the reasons why we don't use it. But most of the time we will have problems with cooling, with having the battery too cold to use it because it discharges too fast. So that's essentially a guideline for not using it too much. The lifetime of the satellite battery is about 2 years. The payload, the camera, has the exposure time of 1 second, which is more than enough to take. It's negligible in the time frame of the whole orbit. The gyroscope uses permanent magnets of 616 Henrys, and we essentially have two boxes in the satellite, each one containing 7 small magnets, niobium magnets, and that's the total magnetic field they give. That equates a force of 6.44 grams, which compared to our satellite, which is about 225, I believe, grams. It can stabilize it once it's deployed from the deployer in a random manner. It can stabilize it about 14 days after deployment, which is fine. It can stabilize, the gyroscopes can stabilize the satellite on the axis Y and Z presented in the right, made in Fusion 360. That's what we need, the Y and Z axis, because the X axis is supposed to be the camera, which is pointed towards the Earth. So that's fine. The antenna consumes not the antenna, the whole electrical system consumes 0.007 volts from our calculations, essentially, per complete transmissions. And it makes a complete transmission, as we set it, at every 11 minutes. Most of this transmission time takes, it's from the cooling. And yeah, the transmission of a data status takes 15 seconds. Transmission of a photo in space takes 10 seconds. In our cellar, takes 25 seconds. Why so? Because in space, not all pixels are saturated with color. In our cellar, we usually made experiments with the light on, and the walls around us are white, so a lot of the pixels were saturated. That's where the surplus of time comes from, essentially. And the data status transmitted by the electrical system contains the internal temperature, which gives us 2 things. We must make sure that we do not overload the battery, and we must make sure we do not cool it too much, because otherwise it can discharge too fast for us to follow. And we also get the voltage and temperature and amperage with every data status to check that it's within the proper parameters. The summary is the following. Again, the satellite will be in a low Earth orbit at about 650 kilometers, with a speed of about 7.5 kilometers per second. That gives an orbit of 1 hour and 13 minutes. Again, the exposure time is very small compared to that. And we have a transmission window about 24 minutes if we consider that only the maximum difference of angle will be about 30 degrees from the zenith. The time that the orbit period will equivalent about 8 to 9 pictures per complete rotation, and the time window will equivalent 1 to 2 photos per communication window, which is okay. The thing here, again, is that we use the radio amateur frequency, because otherwise we would only get about 1 or 2 photos per orbit every 1 hour or so. If you also get help from the radio amateur community, we can use all the orbit. I mean, we no longer need the calculations for a transmission window. And yeah, at that height, the camera will have a resolution of about 1.8 kilometers per pixel. And that's our satellite. Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to pass the microphone to Andra.
Thanks. Oh, wow. Hello, my name is Andra Palada, and I'm 17 years old. As we all know, ROM2 is barely the size of a Rubik's Cube. Although small, this cherished object encapsulates our highest ambitions. Ambitions brought to life by years of hard work from the members of our team. What initially started as a brilliant idea of then 13-year-old Philip is now, 3 years later, a Pico satellite ready for launch to be integrated in 2 days. And we could not be any more thrilled. Obviously, the Pico satellite itself is very near and dear to us. It was, after all, our companion for countless sleepless nights spent working. However, what we want to emphasize is that ROM2 is so much more than the engineering and the hardware involved. Embedded between its wires and its carbon nanotubes are our values that we hold very dear. Of course, we are aware of its technological limitations. It definitely can't be compared to other already existing satellites. But that's not the main goal of our project. Our Pico satellite's purpose goes far beyond reaching outer space. It is our way of communicating the values we stand by, proving that it can be done, promoting inclusivity, and paving the way for satellite launches in Romania. Most importantly, above anything else, we wanted to prove that it can indeed be done. It can be done even if you come from a country with little to no background in the domain. It can be done even if you yourself lack the necessary experience. And most importantly, it can be done even if you're just a bunch of high school students. We know all too well the feeling that a project is simply impossible to finish. All those moments where we've celebrated the slightest of wins only to realize that 3 more obstacles have since replaced it. Yet we constantly reminded ourselves why it is we've been doing this. We want to demonstrate that despite all of the challenges that inevitably arise, it is your personal ambition and determination to find solutions that ultimately help you see your project through to the end. Just as importantly as proving that it can be done, we wish to promote inclusivity in hard sciences. We understand that STEM subjects may initially seem threatening to people our age, which is why the youth usually tend to avoid pursuing such career paths. But what we want to show is that it does not have to be science fiction. It is, after all attainable. With the ambition we've put into this project, we wish to encourage people our age to pursue career paths such as this one. We especially wish to encourage young girls to not let themselves be intimidated by how far ahead boys appear to be in these domains. Despite the undeniable competition, there is space for us in STEM subjects and careers. So we must simply do our best to catch up and give the very best of what we've got. And last, but definitely not least, we want to lay the foundation for satellite launches in Romania. We are well aware that there is huge potential out there. The only thing we are lacking is the ability to efficiently organize and make use of our resources. We want to be the start of progress when it comes to the creation of Romanian satellites. We want to create momentum in this domain, which is why we are so excited to see that other young Romanian students like us are already starting to create such projects. After all, we firmly believe that we must practice what we preach. If we have high expectations of technological advancements in Romania, we too must be the ones striving for them. Thank you.